The Almanack of Naval Ravikant, Chapter 1, Episode 2. This episode covers pages 46 through 61. You do need to be deep in something because otherwise you'll be a mile wide and an inch deep, and you won't get what you want out of life. You can only achieve mastery in one or two things. It's usually things you're obsessed about. All the returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. Play long-term GAMES. Play long-term GAMES with long-term people, you said. All the returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. How does one know if you're earning compound interest? Compound interest is a very powerful concept. Compound interest applies to more than just compounding capital. Compounding capital is just the beginning. Compounding in business relationships is very important. Look at some of the top roles in society, like why someone is a CEO of a public company or managing billions of dollars. It's because people trust them. They are trusted because the relationships they've built and the work they've done has compounded. They've stuck with the business and shown themselves, in a visible and accountable way, to be high-integrity people. Compound interest also happens in your reputation. If you have a sterling reputation and you keep building it for decades upon decades, people will notice. Your reputation will literally end up being thousands or tens of thousands of times more valuable than somebody else who was very talented, but is not keeping the compound interest in reputation going. This is also true when you're working with individual people. If you've worked with somebody for 5 or 10 years and you still enjoy working with them, obviously you trust them, and the little foibles are gone. All the normal negotiations in business relationships can work very simply because you trust each other. You know it will work out. For example, there's another angel in Silicon Valley named Alad Gill, who I like to do deals with. I love working with Alad because I know when the deal is being done, he will bend over backward to give me extra. He will always round off in my favor if there's an extra dollar being delivered here or there. If there's some cost to pay, he will pay it out of his own pocket, and he won't even mention it to me. Because he goes so far out of his way to treat me so well, I send him every deal I have. I try to include him in everything. Then, I go out of my way to try and pay for him. Compounding in those relationships is very valuable. Intentions don't matter. Actions do. That's why being ethical is hard. When you find the right thing to do, when you find the right people to work with, invest deeply. Sticking with it for decades is really how you make the big returns in your relationships and in your money. So, compound interest is very important. 99% of effort is wasted. Obviously, nothing is ever completely wasted because it's all a learning moment. You can learn from anything. But for example, when you go back to school, 99% of the term papers you did, books you read, exercises you did, things you learned, they don't really apply. You might have read geography and history you never reuse. You might have studied a language you don't speak anymore. You might have studied a branch of mathematics you completely forgot. Of course, these are learning experiences. You did learn. You learned the value of hard work. You might have learned something that went deep into your psyche and became a piece of what you're doing now. But at least when it comes to the goal-oriented life, only about 1% of the efforts you made paid off. Another example is all the people you dated until you met your husband or wife. It was wasted time in the goal sense. Not wasted in the exponential sense, not wasted in the learning sense, but definitely wasted in the goal sense. The reason I say this is not to make some glib comment about how 99% of your life is wasted, and only 1% is useful. I say this because you should be very thoughtful and realize in most things, relationships, work, even in learning, what you're trying to do is find the thing you can go all in on. To earn compound interest. When you're dating, the instant you know this relationship is not going to be the one that leads to marriage, you should probably move on. When you're studying something like a geography or history class and you realize you are never going to use the information, drop the class. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of your brain energy. I'm not saying don't do the 99% because it's very hard to identify what the 1% is. What I'm saying is, when you find the 1% of your discipline which will not be wasted, which you'll be able to invest in for the rest of your life, and has meaning to you, go all in and forget about the rest. Intentions don't matter. Actions do. Take ON accountability, embrace accountability, and take business risks under your own name. Society will reward you with responsibility, equity, and leverage. To get rich, you need leverage. Leverage comes in labor, comes in capital, or it can come through code or media. But most of these, like labor and capital, people have to give to you. For labor, somebody has to follow you. For capital, somebody has to give you money, assets to manage, or machines. So to get these things, you have to build credibility, and you have to do it under your own name as much as possible, which is risky. So accountability is a double-edged thing. It allows you to take credit when things go well and to bear the brunt of the failure when things go badly. Clear accountability is important. Without accountability, you don't have incentives. Without accountability, you can't build credibility. But you take risks. You risk failure. You risk humiliation. You risk failure under your own name. Luckily, in modern society, there's no more debtor's prison and people aren't imprisoned or executed for losing other people's money. But we're still socially hardwired to not fail. In public under our own names. The people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names actually gain a lot of power. I'll give a personal anecdote. Up until about 2013, 2014, my public persona was entirely around startups and investing. Only around 2014, 2015 did I start talking about philosophy and psychological things and broader things. It made me a little nervous because I was doing it under my own name. There were definitely people in the industry who sent me messages through the back channel like, "What are you doing? You're ending your career. This is stupid." I kind of just went with it. I took a risk. Same with crypto. Early on, I took a risk. But when you put your name out there, you take a risk with certain things. You also get to reap the rewards. You get the benefits. In the old days, the captain was expected to go down with the ship. If the ship was sinking, then literally the last person to get off was the captain. Accountability does come with real risks, but we're talking about a business context. The risk here would be you would probably be the last one to get your capital back out. You'd be the last one to get paid for your time. The time that you put in, the capital you put into the company, these are at risk. Realize that in modern society, the downside risk is not that large. Even personal bankruptcy can wipe the debts clean in good ecosystems. I'm most familiar with Silicon Valley, but generally, people will forgive failures as long as you were honest and made a high-integrity effort. There's not really that much to fear in terms of failure, and so people should take on a lot more accountability than they do. KNOWLEDG, allocation. Build or buy equity in a business. If you don't own a piece of a business, you don't have a path towards financial freedom. Why is owning equity in a business important to becoming rich? It's ownership versus wage work. If you are paid for renting out your time, even lawyers and doctors, you can make some money, but you're not going to make the money that gives you financial freedom. You're not going to have passive income where a business is earning for you while you are on vacation. This is probably one of the most important points. People seem to think you can create wealth, make money through work. It's probably not going to work. There are many reasons for that. Without ownership, your inputs are very closely tied to your outputs. In almost any salaried job, even one paying a lot per hour like a lawyer or a doctor, you're still putting in the hours, and every hour you get paid. Without ownership, when you're sleeping, you're not earning. When you're retired, you're not earning. When you're on vacation, you're not earning, and you can't earn nonlinearly. If you look at even doctors who get rich, like really rich, it's because they open a business. They open a private practice. The private practice builds a brand, and the brand attracts people, or they build some kind of a medical device, a procedure, or a process with an intellectual property. Essentially, you're working for somebody else, and that person is taking on the risk and has the accountability, the intellectual property, and the brand. They're not going to pay you enough. They're going to pay you the bare minimum they have to get you to do their job. That can be a high bare minimum, but it's still not going to be true wealth where you're retired but still earning. Owning equity in a company basically means you own the upside. When you own debt, you own guaranteed revenue streams and you own the downside. You want to own equity. If you don't own equity in a business, your odds of making money are very slim. You have to work up to the point where you can own equity in a business. You could own equity as a small shareholder where you bought stock. You could also own it as an owner where you started the company. Ownership is really important. Everybody who really makes money at some point owns a piece of a product, a business, or some IP. That can be through stock options if you work at a tech company. That's a fine way to start, but usually the real wealth is created by starting your own companies or even by investing. In an investment firm, they're buying equity. These are the roots to wealth. It doesn't come through the hours. Leverage 1x 1000x 10. 000x. Find a position of leverage. We live in an age of infinite leverage, and the economic rewards for genuine intellectual curiosity have never been higher. Following your genuine intellectual curiosity is a better foundation for a career than following whatever is making money right now. Knowledge only you know or only a small set of people knows is going to come out of your passions and your hobbies, oddly enough. If you have hobbies around your intellectual curiosity, you're more likely to develop these passions. If it entertains you now but will bore you someday, it's a distraction. Keep looking. I only really want to do things for their own sake. That is one definition of art. Whether it's business, exercise, romance, friendship, whatever, I think the meaning of life is to do things for their own sake. Ironically, when you do things for their own sake, you create your best work. Even if you're just trying to make money, you will actually be the most successful. The year I generated the most wealth for myself was actually the year I worked the least hard and cared the least about the future. I was mostly doing things for the sheer fun of it. I was basically telling people, I'm retired, I'm not working. Then, I had the time for whatever was my highest valued project in front of me. By doing things for their own sake, I did them at their best. The less you want something, the less you're thinking about it, the less you're obsessing over it, the more you're going to do it in a natural way. The more you're going to do it for yourself. You're going to do it in a way you're good at, and you're going to stick with it. The people around you will see the quality of your work is higher. Follow your intellectual curiosity more than whatever is hot right now. If your curiosity ever leads you to a place where society eventually wants to go, you'll get paid extremely well. You're more likely to have skills society does not yet know how to train other people to do. If someone can train other people how to do something, then they can replace you. If they can replace you, then they don't have to pay you a lot. You want to know how to do something other people don't know how to do at the time period when those skills are in demand. If they can train you to do it, then eventually they will train a computer to do it. You get rewarded by society for giving it what it wants and doesn't know how to get elsewhere. A lot of people think you can go to school and study for how to make money, but the reality is, there's no skill called business. Think about what product or service society wants but does not yet know how to get. You want to become the person who delivers it and delivers it at scale. That is really the challenge of how to make money. Now, the problem is becoming good at whatever it is. It moves around from generation to generation, but a lot of it happens to be in technology. You are waiting for your moment when something emerges in the world. They need a skill set, and you're uniquely qualified. You build your brand in the meantime on Twitter, on YouTube, and by giving away free work. You make a name for yourself, and you take some risk in the process. When it is time to move on the opportunity, you can do so with leverage, the maximum leverage possible. There are three broad classes of leverage. One form of leverage is labor, other humans working for you. It is the oldest form of leverage, and actually not a great one in the modern world. I would argue this is the worst form of leverage that you could possibly use. Managing other people is incredibly messy. It requires tremendous leadership skills. You're one short hop from a mutiny or getting eaten or torn apart by the mob. Money is good as a form of leverage. It means every time you make a decision, you multiply it with money. Capital is a trickier form of leverage to use. It's more modern. It's the one that people have used to get fabulously wealthy in the last century. It's probably been the dominant form of leverage in the last century. You can see this by looking for the richest people. It's bankers, politicians in corrupt countries who print money, essentially people who move large amounts of money around. If you look at the top of very large companies, outside of technology companies, in many, many large old companies, the CEO job is really a financial job. It scales very, very well. If you get good at managing capital, you can manage more and more capital much more easily than you can manage more and more people. The final form of leverage is brand new, the most democratic form. It is products with no marginal cost of replication. This includes books, media, movies, and code. Code is probably the most powerful form of permissionless leverage. All you need is a computer. You don't need anyone's permission. Forget rich versus poor, white collar versus blue. It's now leveraged versus unleveraged. The most interesting and the most important form of leverage is the idea of products that have no marginal cost of replication. This is the new form of leverage. This was only invented in the last few hundred years. It started with the printing press. It accelerated with broadcast media, and now it's really blown up with the internet and with coding. Now you can multiply your efforts without involving other humans and without needing money from other humans. This book is a form of leverage. Long ago, I would have had to sit in a lecture hall and lecture each of you personally. I would have maybe reached a few hundred people, and that would have been that. This newest form of leverage is where all the new fortunes are made, all the new billionaires. For the last generation, fortunes were made by capital. The people who made fortunes were the Warren Buffetts of the world. But the new generation's fortunes are all made through code or media. Joe Rogan making $50 million to $100 million a year from his podcast. You're going to have PewDiePie. I don't know how much money he's rolling in, but he's bigger than the news. And of course, there's Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs. Their wealth is all code-based leverage. Probably the most interesting thing to keep in mind about new forms of leverage is they are permissionless. They don't require somebody else's permission for you to use them or succeed. For labor leverage, somebody has to decide to follow you. For capital leverage, somebody has to give you money to invest or to turn into a product. Coding, writing books, recording podcasts, tweeting, YouTubing, these kinds of things are permissionless. You don't need anyone's permission to do them, and that's why they are very egalitarian. They're great equalizers of leverage. Every great software developer, for example, now has an army of robots working for him at nighttime while he or she sleeps, after they've written the code, and it's cranking away. You're never going to get rich renting out your time. Whenever you can in life, optimize for independence rather than pay. If you have independence and you're accountable on your output, as opposed to your input, that's the dream. Humans evolved in societies where there was no leverage. If I was chopping wood or carrying water for you, You knew 8 hours put in would be equal to about 8 hours of output. Now we've invented leverage through capital, cooperation technology, productivity, all these means. We live in an age of leverage. As a worker, you want to be as leveraged as possible, so you have a huge impact without as much time or physical effort. A leveraged worker can outproduce a non-leveraged worker by a factor of 1,000 or 10,000. With a leveraged worker, judgment is far more important than how much time they put in or how hard they work. Forget 10x programmers. 1,000x programmers really exist, we just don't fully acknowledge it. See at IDAA Carmack, at Notch, Satoshi Nakamoto, etc. For example, a good software engineer, just by writing the right little piece of code and creating the right little application, can literally create $500 million worth of value for a company. But 10 engineers working 10 times as hard, just because they choose the wrong model, the wrong product, wrote it the wrong way, or put in the wrong viral loop, have basically wasted their time. Inputs don't match outputs, especially for leveraged workers. What you want in life is to be in control of your time. You want to get into a leveraged job where you control your own time and you're tracked on the outputs. If you do something incredible to move the needle on the business, they have to pay you. Especially if they don't know how you did it because it's innate to your obsession or your skill or your innate abilities. They're going to have to keep paying you to do it. If you have specific knowledge, you have accountability, and you have leverage, they have to pay you what you're worth. If